So here's the big idea then. We're to fear the Lord because he is truly scary. How scary? We'll take a look at chapter 8, verses 1 to 4 to begin with. God is scary because he sees the future. Verse 1. The Lord said to me, take a large scroll. The idea is perhaps something akin to one of our sort of roadside advertising hoardings, something public for everyone to see, and write on it with an ordinary pen, so everyone can understand it, to Meah Shalal Hash Baz. Now this is a prophecy in two ways. God has the writing witnessed because it's a prediction of the birth of Isaiah's son, who will be called Meah Shalal Hash Baz. Great baby name, by the way. But his name also means something. It means quick to the plunder, swift to the spoil. His very name is a promise that Israel and Syria are about to be utterly plundered. The hoarding in the street and the birth of the child both proclaim God's absolute sovereignty. He speaks and it happens. And it happens in judgment. God sees the future. But more than that, secondly, the future is much scarier than you thought. You remember last week that Ahaz is so afraid of Syria and Israel that he's formed an alliance with Assyria. He's been wise in his own eyes. See, he's afraid of the spider, so he's teamed up with the lion. So in verses 6 and 7, Assyria will run through those lands, wiping out Syria and Israel, just like the spider being eaten by the lion. But he won't stop there. Verse 8, he will sweep into Judah, swirling over it, passing through and reaching up to the neck. His outspread wings will cover the breadth of your land, Emmanuel. The image in chapter 5 is of a lion taking its prey. Now Assyria is pictured in a different way, as a giant bird of prey, swooping down over the whole land and consuming everything as far as the neck, which we'll discover later it just leaves Jerusalem, the head, protected. Everything else is consumed. See, Ahaz, your fear is misplaced. Assyria will be much worse than Israel and Syria. You're afraid of the spider when you should be afraid of the lion. And so, chapter 7, verses 18 to 25, Egypt and Syria will fill every nook and cranny of the land. As the land is filled, so the people will be utterly violated. They'll be shaved from head to foot as a picture of their complete subjugation. Never again, until Emmanuel arises, will there be a free king of God's people. The land will be so empty that thorns and briars will take over the cultivated fields. No more corn or wheat or grapes. No figs, no anything grow. Now the few who remain eat cheese and honey and hunt wild animals like cavemen. See, the land has been left abandoned to become wild. Ahaz feared the spider when the lion was roaring. See, even that analogy breaks down because he isn't supposed to fear the lion either. The point here is that the Lord is also behind Assyria and Egypt. So verse 18, in that day the Lord will whistle for flies from the Nile Delta in Egypt and for bees from the land of Assyria. The kings of Egypt and Assyria are like a fly and a bee. As far as God is concerned, they're little pests. They obey his call, his commands. He whistles and they do as he bids. The image changes again in verse 20. In that day the Lord will use a razor hired beyond the Euphrates, the king of Assyria. See, the king of Assyria is like a razor blade, a hired tool in God's hands, doing as he's told. In chapter 10, he's described as an axe that God used to cut down his people. And that's the point, I think, of chapter 8, verses 9 and 10. The kings of the earth can gather together, they can try to make their plans, try with all their might, but if the plan is against God's will, then he just laughs at them. And the willful king is shattered. Raise the war cry, you nations, and be shattered. Listen, all you distant lands, prepare for battle and be shattered. Prepare for battle and be shattered. Devise your strategy, but it will be thwarted. Propose your plan, but it won't stand, for God is with us. Ahaz, you see, sees the spider but misses the lion. But much worse, he fails to see that the lion is an agent of God's terrifying judgment, that God holds the lion on a leash and it does only what he bids it to do. So we think about our society here and now. According to that survey, we're afraid of being buried alive, or of snakes and spiders or heights. Every one an irrational fear. Sometimes we wake up and fear genuinely scary things like sickness and unemployment and warfare and death. But even that's not enough, is it? You must not fear the lion, that's the point. The one who has the lion on a leash, he's the one you should fear. The Lord Almighty is the one you are to regard as holy. He's the one you're to fear. He is the one you are to dread. And as we learn to fear him, the one who holds all of that in his sovereign hands, so we can stop worrying about those things in and of themselves. Well, we're going to see in a moment that God is not only a big, scary God, but a safe place, a powerful, safe place for his people. But first, we're going to sing again.